Hey guys, I hope you're all having an awesome day. I've prepared this quick presentation where I'm just going to outline 7 key lessons I learnt during the EPQ journey that will not only save you hours of your time, but will also make your lives a lot easier. I'm going to also summarise my main struggles with each section of the EPQ and suggest how I personally overcame them. So listen up, grab a pen and paper and make sure to pay attention, as you won't want to miss these transformational tips I'm going to present over the course of the next 10 minutes or so. So I'm Will, and I completed my EPQ in early 2023 on the topic question, to what extent is time travel possible, and achieved an A. So if you're aiming for an A, B or C, these tips will be most useful to you. But those of you aiming for an A star will basically need to take what I say in this short presentation and just take it to the next level. So the first thing really is, why is an EPQ actually important? Well, the main reason really is the fact that an A in an EPQ can actually bring down your university offers an entire grade. Also, getting a high grade in EPQ shows a vast variety of different skills, such as dedication, research skills, and academic excellence. So it's really a very important and useful point of reference for universities when they're considering you for your application to their university. But anyway, now on to the main part of the presentation. Hopefully this part of the presentation will win you some time, because I'm basically just going to go over the main struggles I found in each section of the EPQ and how I personally overcame them. So for the activity log, really the struggle I had was just making sure that I had regular entries and they were actually varied, because it was a lot of just like, I hit 1,000 words here, I hit 2,500 words here, I just found this source and added it to my bibliography. A lot of like diary entries, and that is okay, but at the same time you do want it to have like a lot of variety. I mean, personally, the way I overcame this in terms of like having regular entries is really just making sure you do 2 entries a week, and even if it is just a diary, 2 diary entries a week is better than nothing, but do try and vary it a bit more. I had a couple of really good entries. One of them was basically a really good source that I found initially, and then I looked at it in more detail and it was actually just turned out to be a really bad source that wasn't credible, etc. And I basically just wasted 2 hours of my time. But that sort of reflectiveness actually does get you marks, so was actually quite useful for me in the long run. So going on to the literature review, I think this is actually the hardest part of the EPQ, because when you're just staring at the blank page, you've just created your EPQ Word document and you don't really know where to start. So this can be like quite difficult in terms of just starting and getting going. I mean, personally, how I really overcame this was through a few different methods. Firstly, I just read like a lot of websites, articles around my topic, and simply just chose some good sources and just really just started writing. The key with this is just to start and just not really, don't overthink it and just like get going. And also with the literature review, this is the point where you're going to start collecting sources, and you do need somewhere to store them. But in terms of storing your sources initially, just like store a link of a URL or something on a notepad or whatever. Moving on to the discussion. Again, the struggles with the discussion for me was just the blank page. You know, you've got 3,500 words or whatever it is ready to write, and you're just sitting in front of 0, so that can be sort of quite overwhelming. And like the literature review, using exemplars is really, really key here. And just reading a few EPQs just sort of gives you a sense of what a good discussion should really look like. And I really can't stress this enough, but with the discussion, the really, really key thing is that you write a really solid plan that you refer back to constantly. And this basically just massively reduces the stress, because in all parts of the EPQ you know where roughly what you're going to be talking about, so it doesn't really seem so overwhelming. And the last tip with this one is probably the most key. Don't think of it as the entire 3,500 words, whatever the word count is, but think of it as bite-sized chunks. Split it up into each of your arguments and be like, okay, this argument is going to be 500 words, which doesn't seem nearly as overwhelming. Like 500 words is just one side of an A4 written on paper. That really helps with decreasing the sense of stress, I guess. Moving on to the introduction, the difficulties I found with this was really just finding a good way to start it, because obviously the introduction is, clue in the name obviously, introducing your entire presentation and essay. So you really want to sort of hit the reader with something quite powerful. Personally, I included a quote, but this can also be like just some form of enticing statement, but it just needs to be something that attracts the reader, basically. So really what you're doing in the introduction is just listing your arguments / conclusions and just giving some key bits of each. I mean, the introduction and abstract are probably, in my opinion, the two easiest bits of everything, because you've already done all the hard work. You've done the discussion, you've done the literature review. It's just now a case of using what you've done in the discussion and just sort of condensing it down in the introduction, which can be a bit challenging, but on the whole, like, it should be quite easy to do that. With the conclusion, in many ways it's quite similar to the introduction in terms of the struggles I found with it. So it's really just stating your final outcome, your sort of overwhelming argument of your research, and you basically just restate your question and give a yes or a no, and then go into a bit more depth using your research and arguments. I mean, this can be quite tricky. I personally just think that if you just read over your discussion again, so it's just really fresh in your mind, and just ask yourself, what are the key arguments here? And just write down 1 or 2 sentences from each paragraph and just write down what the main point is. With the abstract, very similar to the introduction, just shorter really. So you're just basically condensing your entire essay into about 200 words, which can actually be quite tricky, especially if you've got like a lot of detail in your essay. For me, I overcame this issue just by thinking what the absolute arguments are, and just make sure you're brief when explaining them, so it's not more than 200 words. So the evaluation, it's the part where you basically just take a few hundred words to reflect on what you've learned and what you would do differently next time. Similarly to the literature review, with your blank page, you just want to start. The key is really just to not overthink with the evaluation. Just look at some exemplars and just write and just get it done quickly. With the final presentation, this is the point where I think it really depends on the individual, because a lot of people can just do public speaking, but then there are also like people who find it really stressful, and to be honest, the best advice here is just practice. You've just got to give your presentation to your mum, dad, sister, dog, etc. And basically just don't overcomplicate the slideshow. And notice in this presentation I've just created really simple slides, because it just means that you're focusing more on the speaker than just deciphering all the tens of images and, hundreds of characters on the page. So, I just have a title and then I'm just speaking around the title for each of these slides. So now what you've really been waiting for, the 7 key steps, which I think really got me my A in EPQ. So the first thing is just picking a topic that you're passionate about. And when I say this can seem like really just an obvious point to make, but it is actually really key to just briefly touch upon, because if you don't pick a topic you're passionate about, you're just going to get really just bored and you won't have any motivation to research and write. And more than anything, you just won't enjoy it and it'll just be really boring for you. And at the end of the day, the EPQ is to spend time improving writing skills and reading skills, but also, more than anything, just enjoying taking a moment to just research something you love, which is a really nice aspect of the EPQ. The second thing is really to stay ahead of the game. Not only do you get more commendations from your teacher if you hand in work early, but you just generally have more time, and it's just much less stressful if you're ahead of the game. It just means that you can sort of relax a bit more in class rather than knowing that you have to write, 500 words in that lesson or something. And to be honest, this just comes from doing a lot of work outside the lessons, and for me especially just in the holidays. So number 3, use a wide range of sources. A lot of people get caught up in just using one type of source, but you're actually marked up for using a variety. And if I'm completely honest, it's just more fun experimenting with different sources, seeing what works best for your reading type, etc. In my EPQ, I personally used a combination of articles, journals, books, and websites as my main sources. So number 4, update your activity log at least twice a week. So again, this is a really key one, and I did briefly mention it earlier, but you're actually marked up for regular entries. If you don't have anything important to say, then as I said earlier, just treat it like a diary, but the key is really just to make sure you do get at least 2 in every week, because as I said, you're marked up for regularity, so that's really key there. And also, another point, just make sure you don't forget to keep the entries going in the holidays as well. Number 5, my bib. I want you to all, right now, go to Chrome extensions and search for my bib and download the extension onto your device. This honestly completely and utterly transformed my EPQ journey forever. It basically is a tool which auto-cites all your sources for you, and thus it takes your bibliography like 10 minutes to do instead of 10 hours to do. And I genuinely mean it when I say this, it saves hours, not minutes, hours. And this is probably the most key message I'm gonna say here. It really just saved so much time. So make sure you do that right now. Number 6, pick sources carefully. This is actually quite a crucial point, but again, going back to my bib, the Chrome extension, it actually has an inbuilt credibility checker. So like any scholarly articles, journals, or JSTOR are fine, and they come up on the Chrome extension as something like these sources are credible. And if it's like a website or something that my bib doesn't quite like 100%, it says like these sources are probably credible, or they might be credible. And then if you use sources like Twitter or Facebook or something, they just say these sources aren't credible. So it's a really useful tool, my bib, again, for checking the credibility of stuff. It's really key here to just not use any random sources you just, like the first one you see on Google. I mean, it's really key to use Google to like read around your topic area, but when it actually comes to picking sources, you've got to use, Google Scholar and JSTOR, because just average websites on Google just simply aren't credible for the type of sources you need. So the final point, 7, is to ask questions. This is such a key one again. You're surrounded by so many experienced staff in the EPQ. Your EPQ teacher, the head of EPQ, you've really just got to use them. Make the most of them, ask loads of questions, and they can just really help you and just speed up and simplify your EPQ process. And that is what they're there for after all. So that is it. This was my step-by-step guide, which I believe, if it is applied correctly, will ensure that you will do well. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'm sure your teacher can just give you my email address. But that's it from me, and I wish you the best of luck on your EPQ journey.